Yeah.
Jacob.
Okay, we're going to reconvene to open session, the regular meeting of the Albany Unified School District Board of Education for Tuesday, September 25th, 2018. May we have a roll call, please?
President Black.
Here.
Vice President Stapleton Gray. Here. Board Member Blanchard.
Here.
Board Member Clark.
Here.
Board Member Chutain.
Here.
Student Board Member Weinstein.
Here.
Student Board Member Mala.
Okay, for those who wish to participate, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, the reading of the AUSD mission and vision statement.
The mission of Albany Unified School District is to provide excellent public education that empowers all to achieve their fullest potential as productive citizens.
AUSD is committed to creating comprehensive learning opportunities in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment, addressing the individual needs of each student.
Thank you. The board took no action in closed session. Next is the agenda. Does anybody want any changes to the agenda? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
A second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The consent calendar, I believe the superintendent has one change she needs to make to an item in the consent.
Thank you, President Black. For the consent item, overnight field trip, Albany High School All Choir Spring Tour to Anaheim, California. In the details, it says that students in Albany High School who are members of the treble chamber, bass chamber, and chamber singer choirs, we need to add "and the concert choir." That was omitted from the details. So I'd like to add that as part of the approval for this field trip.
Okay, does anyone have any other items they want to question, discuss, or pull on the consent? Okay, with the stipulated change, do we have a motion on the consent calendar?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Board and superintendent reports.
Thank you, President Black, trustees, student board members. I have two items to report. Our Budget Advisory Committee met last week, Friday, in the Albany Middle School Library, and they spent time looking at an awful lot of data. They looked at budget, they looked at unaudited actuals, they looked at the proposed budget, and they looked at data that we gave them on the breakdown of percentages of staff to the total budget, both administrative, certificated, classified, non-represented. It was a good meeting, very productive meeting, and there's more data that the Budget Advisory Committee has asked for. All of the information can be found if you go to our website, and Jackie's going to help me find this here so you can see it. So if you go to community, you can go to board-appointed advisory committees, and there's a budget advisory committee, and it has information on agendas. We will have our minutes there, and there will also be supporting documents. You can also go to the community section of the webpage and look at AUSD budget and get an awful lot of information. So all of our, what is discussed and what is presented to the Budget Advisory Committee is there. There's also a place on the district's website for the public to go in and provide their input on, excuse me, what they would like to have as budget priorities, but they can also add in their additional information if they have any revenue ideas. Excuse me. So we want to make sure that we have as much information out there as possible. Budget Advisory Committee will be meeting next on October 3rd, and it will also be in the AMS library. The other item that oh, and by the way, just if anybody wants that information, we put extra copies in the back of the room, and it's also on our website. The second piece of information I'm going to share with you, I'd like to just read this very short letter. This is from the University of Chicago. It says, "Dear Ms. Williams, I am pleased to inform you that one of your teachers, Kevin James, has been selected for the University of Chicago's Outstanding Educator Award. This distinguished award has existed for more than 3 decades. Each year, we invite entering first-year students to nominate an educator who has influenced them, challenged them, or helped them along the path toward intellectual growth. We receive letters back from hundreds of students inspired by teachers who have changed the course of their lives, who taught them to reimagine text, to delve deeper into problem solving, and to think beyond the borders of the classroom in pursuit of their own education. As an institution that prides itself on being committed to the life of the mind, we at the University of Chicago are heartened to see that your schools foster and support such outstanding individuals. Our sincerest congratulations to both you and your faculty for the continued support of excellence. We hope that you will share this good news with your community." So I really would like to congratulate and commend Kevin James, who is I believe, our history teacher at the at Albany High School. Thank you, and that's my report.
Thanks. Good to hear. On Monday, the superintendent and I attended the 2x2x2 meeting. That's a meeting between the district, the city, and UC. It was pretty well attended. And we presented, the superintendent gave a report on the status of our construction projects. And then UC gave a little report on their student housing initiative, which is coming from the Office of the President and is not just at Berkeley, it's UC-wide. And UC Berkeley is coming up with a master development plan. And they have no specific plan or timeline for Albany at present, but promised we would get plenty of notice before they add a lot more students for our schools. Well, from the city, let us know that there's a new emergency services manager at City Hall who coordinates emergency preparedness, and they will be holding monthly meetings at private homes, people who want to do that, and there will be a local hazards mitigation plan. And they'll be interested in learning about our school emergency plans that we're working on when we're ready to report on that. The question was raised as to whether we should have a joint city council school board meeting, and I know that people on this board have expressed a desire to have that. So I'll be meeting with the mayor. I'd appreciate it if you sent me your ideas as what you'd like to see on an agenda for such a meeting, so that we have something compelling that the City Council will want to talk about with us. And we'll see when we can schedule that. Anyone else? Charlie?
So I attended the Budget Advisory Committee meeting as a member of the public, not as a committee member. And I just wanted to appreciate the materials that Jackie and Val prepared for that meeting. I think they were well received. My impression was people found them useful, especially the ones that let people kind of drill down. You had some nice kind of online access that let people drill down into categories. So I just wanted to say it was off to a good start.
Jacob?
Yeah, I just briefly wanted to say that coming up this weekend on Sunday at 11 o'clock, Cornell's having their annual Silly Olympics fundraiser. It's a really great time for the kids. Unfortunately, I won't be able to be there. And my wife's been working really hard with a lot of the other parents to get it organized. So if people have time, please stop by. And also, I wanted to thank the whole Albany Middle School staff, especially Miss Brill. I went to my son's back to school night the other night, and it was just really well run. His core teachers, Ms. Duran and Ms. Morris, and his PE teacher, Ms. Kep, all had wonderful presentations, and I knew he was in good hands, but it's nice to actually meet the teachers. And I spoke to Ms. Brill a little bit before, and I told her something that I really, really like is the daily communication that comes home from middle school. She said it started maybe a couple of years ago, but it's really nice. You know, when I come home, the first thing I do is check my email and there's some kind of update, and I appreciate it. I told her it's not too long. You know, a lot of people don't want to read all this stuff, but it kind of just is a reminder, this is coming up, or it acknowledges the kids who got, the Cobra gotcha, you know? So it was just kind of nice, and I don't know if the high school does that, and I don't know if it'd be really practical for the elementary schools to do it, but I was really happy with my son's experience so far at middle school, and wanted to give the whole staff there a big shout out.
Great, thanks. Kim?
Okay. I also went to the Albany Middle School open back to school night, and it was wonderful. It was preceded by a meeting of the AMS PTA, which was really well run, and they collected topics for meetings for the rest of the year, which I thought was a nice way to start out by reaching out to parents about what parents wanted to hear about. I also went to the high school back to school night, which is always fun. You getting around in those hallways and up and down that staircase, you get into close contact with all your neighbors. I also wanted to point out that the PTSA at the high school ran a math circle where math at the high school was discussed. And that was an interesting meeting and relates to one of the items that we'll hear about later on in the agenda. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Student board member report.
Thank you. So at AHS on Friday, September 21st, the Albany High School varsity football team celebrated a 34-0 win against John Sweat. In the coming few weeks, colleges such as NYU, UC Santa Barbara, and USC, and a lot more will be visiting Albany High School for an informational session. More information is posted on the Albany High School website. Albany High is also in the middle of Start with Hello Week, a week promoting kindness and community in schools designed by the Sandy Hook Promise. At AMS, a Black Parent Engagement Committee meeting will be held on October 2nd from 5:30 to 6:30 at Ocean View. On October 3rd, students are encouraged to travel to school on foot or on wheels for Albany Middle's International Walk and Roll to School Day.
At Cornell, like you had said, there's the Silly Olympics. Those will be held on September 30th. And then there will also be community time at the Cornell Playground on October 3rd. At Marin, the first PTA meeting is being held tonight, September 25th. And the Marin Book Fair will be held on October 1st and 2nd. And then at Ocean View, the temporary housing plan was presented to the PTA at their first meeting. And ELAC and DLAC meetings will be held on September 26th at AMS.
Also yesterday, I met with an AHS PE teacher and Miss Ritchie to clear up what was said last meeting. So the accurate information is that only 10% of the grade is a fitness component, and 70% of the grade is participation, which is coming to class dressed out and participating in warm-ups and a few other things. So students can still earn an A in the class if they are not good at the mile.
Thank you. Any questions, Jacob?
Yeah, I just forgot one thing, but if anybody else wanted to go first, I've already spoken.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to remind people that the PTA is holding a candidates forum on October 3rd at the Little Theater. I think it's 7 o'clock, but I wish I would have had that opportunity when I was running. You know, the more opportunities the public has to hear the people running, I think the better. So if anyone can make it, October 3rd, Little Theater, School Board Candidates Forum.
Thanks. Kim?
Okay, one other thing. Val talked about the budget information on the website, but she went really fast. I wonder if it's possible to go back to the main page of the website. Here. Okay, if you go under Community and you go to AUSD Budget, you get to this marvelous page that has current budget, previous year's budget, the budget priorities process. If you keep on scrolling down, you get to the Budget Advisory Committee link there, which has the schedule, the agendas, and the minutes. And below that, you get to the news, so any announcements that we've put out about the budget. So this page is really kind of a central site to get to a lot of different information. So I just wanted to, give it 30 seconds there so people can see where everything is. Thanks.
Okay. Are any questions or comments for the students? Well, that's good. So that brings us to persons to address the board on matters not on the agenda. Is there anyone here who wants to address the board? Please come up.
Hi there. My name is Helen Garcia. I'm here representing the Albany Armada Aquatics program, which covers youth and adult programming that we use the Albany Community Pool for. We rent pool space there. We're a private user group, and we have quite a great little swim team going on there. We have about 160 swimmers presently on the team, and a third of those are Albany residents. We cover a wide range of skill level between elite level swimmers all the way to novice and beginner swimmers. We've sent swimmers off to swim in college as far as Cornell, Wesleyan, and UC Santa Cruz. So we're pretty proud of our achievements there. But I'm here to address a contract issue we've had with the Albany pool. May, we were told we would have to limit our lane space and be in 7 lanes to run our program, which previously was run out of 8 lanes. This was based on the shortfall from the Albany pool from last year of $100,000, and it was presented as a goal to bring in more revenue. They ran some data, and it was really pretty clear that Armada renting the lane versus the lap swimmers was either breaking even or better for them to have Armada in there. So when we do run our program, we have a wide range of abilities. 1 lane represents about 8 kids per group, which we have 5 different groups. So 1 less lane to run our program means 40 less kids on a team. We already have a waiting list, so this really does affect our program quite tremendously. So I'm here to be heard, and hopefully you guys can discuss this further and maybe make it an agenda item. But the data did show that Armada brings in half of the revenue to the aquatic center, and essentially we're their best customer. And for us to sustain our program and to continue to bring this kind of revenue to the pool, we need that lane space. And this is affecting students from your school district, Albany residents, and the pool committee was this was brought to the attention of the pool committee, and it was denied. They did not, vote in favor of our team, instead yielding the lane to lap swim. So I think that was based on an adult's perspective of, their needs. But as a school district, I hope you can see that the youth and the athletes of your community do deserve that space.
Thanks. If you can hang around for a little while, we have scheduled, I can't promise it'll happen at exactly 8:30, but we have a report from the Aquatic Center on their finances.
Right.
So that is on the agenda. We can't comment on things that are not on the agenda.
Yeah.
But if you wait until
Sure.
that, then you might be able to get some answers.
Okay. I think it wasn't directly related to what's on the agenda and what's being decided today, but I wasn't sure, so I thought I'd. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kim?
I can ask for information, though, right, from the speaker? I'd be interested to know the age range. I mean, you said it's up to adult, but I'd be interested to know the majority of the Armada is in what age range?
The younger age groups. So we have kids as young as 5 years old to high school seniors, but the bulk of our swimmers are ages 6 to 12.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else have matters not on the agenda? Okay, well, then we'll get on to the agenda, which is pretty full tonight. First, we have a staff report on the status of the high school new addition construction.
Thank you, President Black. Trustees, the purpose of this item is for the board to receive an update on the Albany High School addition. I do have also here today Juan Barroso, who is our project manager, who will be able to help us with some information and to answer questions. So just real quick history for Albany High School. Albany High School went through a design phase, or a design team who met several times to meet with the bridging architects to discuss various phases. The bridging architect then created what are called bridging documents, and then we went through the process to find a builder architect team. And so that's an extensive process, and that team was chosen. Once the architectural designs were done, we submitted for the Department of State Architects, that's DSA submittal. And then we're required to do what is called a geotechnical study. And then during the summer, there was a demolition of the amphitheater area so that now you can see it's blocked off at the high school. So the original timeline for Albany High School to have we're going to call this the Albany High School New Addition, okay? So we've completed the demolition of the amphitheater. The geotechnical study was done in May of 2018. We did submit construction documents to DSA in July, so all that was on schedule. We were notified last week that the Division of State Architect is delayed by about 3 months. And so that pushes off our construction start date. So we originally had planned to have construction begin on September 4th, and this is now delayed 3 months, possibly until January of 2019, given whenever the DSA gives us the approval, and of course as we get closer to the holidays. And the project completion date was supposed to be August 6, 2019, and that of course now is delayed possibly until December of 2019. So the DSA review is currently behind schedule. It's due to, probably just they're probably backlogged with the numerous amounts of probably projects that come to them. We also have this open California Geological Survey. It's called the CGS item that we now have to address, and then we need to resubmit to DSA for review. And so the geotechnical survey is done, and it is done by a geotechnical engineer who submits the report to the California Geological Survey, CGS, and so that was done in April. CGS sent us a letter requesting additional assessment of the site soils. And so we had the additional assessment done, and the report resulted in a report of it need an 18% increase in structural design criteria. So the building structure possibly, I will say the word possibly, have to be redesigned, and there's potential cost and scheduling impacts. Since we've received this information, Juan has been in contact with both the DSA, person from DSA, as well as the engineer from Alton Construction, and he's also been talking to people that he knows to really dig into looking at what this report is. And so I've asked Juan to come and explain some of the details of what specifically the geological report says, some of the questions that I know the board submitted, and what the implications of what this report as well as the response from our engineer was. And so, Juan, if I can have you come to the dais, please, to give us a little bit more information on the geological survey.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you guys can see the table. I'm going to speak to that a little bit. Thank you, Superintendent Williams, for giving me the opportunity to come and give an explanation of some of the issues we're dealing with relative to CGS. So as Superintendent stated, as part of the approval process for the project, the district has to produce a geotechnical study that's based on the site, and that is given to the design-build team when they're selected. In this case, they were given this information last November. And so they based their proposal based on the geotechnical study that was given to them with the bridging documents. And as their design process goes forward, and they work with the committee to finalize the design, they reach a point where they start designing the building structure. So the design of that building structure has to meet the requirements of the geotechnical report. And so the tables I have above show some of the key parameters that the structural engineers have to meet. I'm not going to explain what each of them means because I couldn't. It's technically too complex. But these numbers mean something to the structural engineer who takes them and says, okay, based on these numbers, the footings have to be so big, the columns have to be so big, and the connections have to resist so many pounds of force. So that's the idea. The table on the bottom is the data that was part of the original geotechnical study. And as the design-build team designed the structure, this report gets submitted to CGS ahead of DSA submittal. And so that's customary. CGS has to review it, and they don't actually approve it. They give a concurrence that the report is appropriate. It's some language like it's adequate or appropriate. So they don't technically give an approval of the data or of the report. When the report was submitted to CGS, we got their response letter, and they concurred with most of the report, 90% of the report, I would say. But they had a request that the engineer go out and reassess the site. And so they did that and did additional physical testing of the soils, which revealed properties. In this case, it is the velocity with which a seismic wave travels through the soil. Again, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but that is the data that was tested. Based on that, the site classification went from a type D, which is the bottom table. It went to a type C, which is the top table. And in most cases, a type D is a more conservative design parameter, meaning that type C usually means it's better soil to build on. So this seems counterintuitive. When we spent the last week digging into it, I've spoken with the geotechnical engineer who prepared the reports. I've spoken to the structural engineer who now is looking at different criteria and has to revise the structure to meet the new criteria. And just this morning, I spoke with the representative from the California Geological Survey who wrote the letter. So we spoke to her to get an explanation of why the additional assessment was required or why she requested it. And she did give me a clear explanation. She said that based on the proximity of this site to the Hayward Fault and the type of soil that is known to exist on that site, she believed that one of the key parameters, which I've circled in red here, in type D, would not be adequate in her mind for the type of seismic forces that this site could experience. And so she asked for the geotechnical engineer to do the additional testing based on her belief that this item circled in red, which is, she referred to as the short wave seismic acceleration factor, we'll call it SMS, of 1.891 would be inadequate based on her knowledge of the site, her knowledge of the Hayward Fault. And the testing did indicate that that factor would be higher despite the soil being a type C, which in most cases is considered better soil. My question to her this morning was, you know, to me and to most people, that seems counterintuitive. She said, I acknowledge that, but she did confirm that the result that we're showing here is what she expected would come out of the additional testing. So based on that conversation, she's going to complete her review of the resubmittal. I got the impression she is going to concur with the revised data. She does not believe there is an error or anything that seems out of line to her. And so that's the latest knowledge I have of kind of how this came about and where I think it's going to go.
Okay, we have questions? Raleigh?
So first, I just wanted to thank both Juan and Val for addressing my barrage of questions over the last week or so. I did indeed send both of them about 1,000 questions on this. And as Juan indicated, what the California Geological Survey told us did seem counterintuitive, because basically they told us that the soil type was really more stable than what had been assumed. So how do you get a more stringent design requirement? Well, it's in the details. And so I just wanted to make two observations. One is that I really appreciate that we have now caught this so that we're not building a seismically deficient building. Basically, it will be designed according to the top table. Those numbers refer to G, gravitational forces. So 2.224 G represents twice the force of gravity, basically. So, as I read these reports, we do need to design the building to 2.224 G instead of 1.891. I think that's a good thing that we have identified this and will be strengthening the building, and I absolutely think that's what we should be doing. The question I think I have that this raises for me is whether or not we have tried to do this work too quickly. All of this was predicated on our trying to get the Ocean View project going and get Ocean View kids into the middle school annex and the high school addition next year. And so I think what I'm trying to think about what the lesson is here, and that is that what I saw in the timeline is that we submitted a report to CGS in April. CGS sent us their analysis in June. But yet what we gave our design bid team was the old design specs, the 1.891. That's what the design team got to work with in June when they prepared their documents for DSA. So I think we might have just gotten ahead of ourselves here, that perhaps we should have waited a little bit longer to submit our plans to DSA until after we'd been through the whole review and reassessment. I just wanted to flag that as maybe something we need to think about as we go into the Ocean View project, that it sounds good to do some of these things in parallel, because there's such a long review time at these state agencies, and yet the consequences here are very clear that we actually went to DSA with essentially having given our design build team data that had been flagged or were going to be flagged as being inadequate. So I think there's a lesson there, and I think that we need to rethink some of our schedules.
Jacob?
Yeah, I had a question for Val. On page 24, on your PowerPoint or whatever, you said that there was a slow response from DSA, and I would like to know what you mean by that, because I don't see DSA being the one who's being slow to respond. It looked like our report wasn't adequate.
So I think, and Juan can answer that too, but I think it's.
I'm asking you.
Thank you.
You put it together. Yes,
and after my conversations with Juan about the DSA, why the DSA is 3 months delayed, excuse me, it's probably due to a backlog. It's not that they're slow to respond, it's that they have probably a backlog of, I don't know if you want to add more to that, but it's really the fact that DSA came back and said that they were 3 months delayed in our project.
Yeah, so the delay in the project is, I think there's two components to it. The DSA's plan check comments to us were about a month behind. So that set us about a month behind. And then this issue also came forward just in the last several weeks. And then so the back check process with DSA, when Val asked me, how do I think that's going to, how long do I think that's going to take? I think that's also going to be a slow process. So the 3 month delay is my forecast of how long I think it's going to take to respond to DSA's comments, incorporate any revisions that need to be included based on the new CGS data, and get DSA to review those changes and give us the approval.
Right, but the way it's worded, it sounds to me as if DSA is the one who's being slow. We're not giving them what they needed, right?
I think DSA's response has been a little slow. I don't know that we can say that all 3 months are due to DSA's process at this point.
It sounds like it's something we didn't do what we were supposed to do, or it didn't come back adequately for them to move forward. And then as far as the letter was dated June 11th, we're here at September 25th, more than 3 months before we're even talking about it. So somehow it's DSA's fault?
Well, the connection between the CGS issue and DSA is that we got DSA's comments on our submittal last week. So until we receive DSA's plan check comments, there's nothing we can do to respond to this issue or to any of the other DSA comments. And so that's kind of the implication of getting a slower DSA response, is that we're basically sitting on this until we see what DSA's initial comments are before we can respond.
Okay.
My understanding is that initially when we submitted to DSA, we expected to hear back from them in August, and we hadn't. So there is a delay at DSA.
I think what might have helped if I had clarified more in my PowerPoint that it was a combination of three factors. A delay from DSA, the geological survey increase, and then the submittal of the documents by the design build team.
Yeah, and the unknown at this point is how do we address this issue? Because up until this morning, we were really trying to find a way to get back to the original criteria, or get back to a criteria that would not require an increase in the structure. So we've spent a lot of time really making sure this isn't an error, or this isn't an anomaly that shouldn't be there. And so as of my conversation with CGS, I'm pretty satisfied that CGS is going to come back and say, this is what I expected, this is the criteria you have to design to. And so now the unknown is what is going to be the extent of the redesign? How is DSA going to treat that back check process? Because DSA is also going to notice, okay, we're now checking a project in which the criteria changed kind of halfway through. And that's why I gave Val the estimate of those 3 months. it could be sooner, but I also don't want to overpromise at this point based on where we are.
Charlie?
So I just wanted to acknowledge that there are actually two different things going on here, one involving CGS and one involving DSA, and those are actually different agencies, and they've kind of intersected in a particularly interesting way, but there are two different kinds of review processes that are at play here. I think the question that really as a board we're going to have to wrestle with a little bit is fundamentally, I had the same reaction as Juan, that surely this is a mistake. And I'm satisfied that staff has done due diligence and tracked this down and determined that, in fact, the original Nino and Moore report is incorrect and needs to be updated. And so the interesting question then is the fact that we gave the design bid team the original Nino and Moore specs. They gave us a design that was appropriate for those original specs. Now we have pretty well established that that was in error. It needs to be upgraded. I'll say again, I'm very appreciative that we have identified before the building is built that there needs to be an upgrade. But there is a cost that's associated with this. And so we're going to have to think about, where's the money coming from? It's coming from the bond, but who's paying for it? I guess we'll have to see the cost estimates at some point. I'd like to see that. And I'll just put in a plug that, in my opinion, the design bid team is probably entitled to some cost compensation here, because we gave them the geotech report. They put together a design based on what now seems to be incorrect geotechnical specifications. It's not really the design bid team's fault that they put that design together within their guaranteed maximum price. Now there's a clear cost increment. We're going to have to think about that.
True. It's a good thing they haven't actually started construction yet, because it would be a lot worse if they had. I do want to throw in here just my 2 cents that I'm kind of upset that Nino and Moore got it so wrong. And I don't seem, from a little investigation that I've done, it doesn't seem like their initial assessment was carried out really with due diligence, that they really did a good job on that. And so I don't know if we have any way to address that as having something that happened before, but going forward, I'd be very reluctant to use them again for geotechnical evaluations. Ross?
So we're examining the trees, and I think it's worth backing up and looking at the forest. The implications of this are, one, that the new construction at the high school will probably cost a bit more because it needs to be stronger, et cetera. If it's not completed before the end of next summer, we obviously cannot move and use it as housing, hence would bump the Ocean View project, unless we had an alternative way to house students, another year. Delaying that will cost more money. The longer we delay the school's construction, the more it will cost. And I would look to this and ask, are we being over-optimistic? Were we being over-optimistic anyway to have an Ocean View plan, shovel-ready by the fall? And I have to think so, because if we have people digging around in the dirt of the high school annex, well, we've got a huge site in the Ocean View site, which I presume hasn't been seismically investigated for a long time, other than, well, when they were looking at the building structure, no one was going in and looking for liquefaction risk, I'm guessing. So I'd say, being very sober and looking at the future of construction is in order. We're going to absolutely have to go back and look at how the numbers look. I'd also say we have buildings that aren't falling down, and it may make more sense keeping more of them. I don't know the work currently of the site planning for Ocean View, but if we're keeping some of the buildings there, I'd still go back to potentially recommend we merely build a two-story annex on the north side and leave everything else untouched, given that we then don't have to go to the DSA, we don't have to have done seismic on all the rest of the site. I throw that out there as a tentative proposal, but I think the board will have to look at construction again with this one-year hiccup on the table.
Kim?
This is very technical stuff, and perhaps I've gotten something wrong here, so please correct me. In the public forum, it's great to be corrected because then everybody knows the right thing, but you said that the bottom chart behind you found that the high school site was a D type, and that it's actually better in general for building to have a type C type, which is the newer finding. Now, I'm not sure, I mean, the numbers are different. It's 1.9 versus 2.2. That doesn't seem to me to be, you know, it's not a huge difference numerically. I'm not sure what kind of scale this is on. But what this seems to me is that is that the decision was made because of our proximity to the Hayward Fault, that we just needed to have an extra strong building. The soil was tested. The soil was found to be better than we originally thought it was, but we're still, because we're close to the Hayward Fault, going to have to build a stronger building.
Not exactly.
Is that wrong?
At first glance, that is exactly what it looks like. But what it turns out is that type D soils are considered bad seismically because soft soils tend to magnify the shaking of an earthquake. But that affects tall buildings the most because of the resonance frequency of a tall building is a lower frequency. So what the soft soils will do is attenuate the high frequencies and put that energy into the lower frequencies. A stiffer soil passes through the high frequencies, less attenuated, and does not magnify the lower frequencies. But for a smaller building, like a two-story building that we're building, the high frequencies are more important for the survival of the building than the low frequencies, because a short building isn't affected by the low frequency shaking of a soft soil. So it's in the details. It's because it's a short building on a stiff soil that the high frequencies are more important in this case. And the proximity to the Hayward Fault is important because the high frequencies are attenuated with distance in any case, but we're so close to the fault that there will be a lot of shaking at the high frequencies.
Okay, well, so what this...
Did that make sense?
Yes, it did. Thank you. That's the most technical explanation I've heard so far. And this is important stuff. We have the high school addition is the second project. The biggest projects are yet to come, the rebuild renovation of Ocean View and Marin. So if it's going to cost us more to build the high school addition, and we're watching every dollar of this bond money, I see that there could be implications here for the prices of Ocean View and for Marin also. You know, they're also close to the Hayward Fault, and I think that there's been new supercomputer modeling done of expected quakes from the Hayward. I think that Lawrence Berkeley Labs was involved in a big computer simulation of that, which has caused changes in building expectations going forward. And so we could be looking at increased construction costs at both of those sites, and those are our biggest projects, and so those increases will be larger than this small new addition at the high school. So it does make me worry, but I'm also, and I just want to say that because our community needs to realize that we're doing everything we can with the bond money that the community is providing us, but it's limited. The other thing that Charlie mentioned about, possibly going too fast is that the reason that we're trying to track all of these projects as quickly as possible is because we're seeing accelerated increases in construction costs above what was built into the plan. And I think that's because of the for one thing, I think it's related to the tariffs from materials coming from overseas, like the steel and whatnot, and it's also related to the fires and mudslides that have happened in California the past few years that have sort of soaked up all of the available construction companies and personnel, and so these accelerated increases in cost are going to affect us as well. So I don't think that we should move more slowly. I think that we need to keep on moving as quickly as we can, but we're just, to get as much building out as we can out of B&E. But I think that we're going to have to be flexible, because when delays like this happen, we have to step back and plan again.
Yeah, we also need to consider alternative plans for housing the students at Ocean View.
So in that regard, I wanted to second Ross's suggestion that we agendize another discussion of the overall schedule and the housing plan for students. I think we need to revisit that.
Okay, so we have 2 board members who've asked for that, so that will go on the agenda. Thank you.
But I also want to be careful before the board discusses housing plans, because we're not professional educators except for Jacob here, and I think it's very important that the site principals of all the sites that are going to be affected be able to look at plans and decide what's educationally sound, because they know that better than we do.
We actually are going to be meeting with, I'm going to be meeting with the principals on Thursday to discuss temporary student housing in light of this new information.
I have one more proposal. For those of you who do not know, Paul is, by training, a geophysicist. I suggest that we ask him to review the next geotechnical report that comes in.
Okay, should we move on to the next item?
I'd like to make a final comment on our next steps on the CGS issue, so that folks are aware of kind of where we're going with it. So what we've done is we brought in a peer review structural engineer to work on our team, to work with Alton structural engineer to make sure that whatever response is needed to meet the new criteria is appropriate and that it's not over-designed. So we started that process yesterday in a workshop, and as usual, what we find is that there are some safety factors built into the original design. Some of the loads that were assumed for the original design maybe were a little higher than were needed, and so I see an ability to make some adjustments to the original design so that we're not taking kind of the full hit for this increase. So we're hopeful that that's really going to help the potential cost impact of this issue. So we're working pretty hard on that this week.
Good, thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the public before we move on? Okay. We have another staff report, also scheduled for 15 minutes. Let's see how that goes. 9th grade mathematics enrollment.
Thank you, President Black. I'm going to turn this over to Marie Williams, who is our Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment.
I will do my best not to talk for 15 minutes, so that if there are questions or comments, we don't go too much over time. So good evening, Superintendent Williams, Board President Black, board members, community. This board item is a required report. Senate Bill 359, which is the California Mathematics Placement Act of 2015, provides the impetus for districts to implement a board policy around mathematics placement. Here is just some language from SB 359. The second bullet point, the second sentence, a pupil's 9th grade math course placement is a crucial crossroads for his or her educational success. Misplacement in the sequence of mathematics courses creates a number of barriers and results in pupils being less competitive, and on and on and on. This was very much the case when pre-Common Core, I think, when, as an example that's cited in this language but is not here, when students would take, for example, an algebra course at the middle school and earn a satisfactory grade, and then go on to the high school and be forced to repeat that same algebra course. With the implementation of Common Core standards, this notion of sort of students being at the 8th grade taking courses, going to the 9th grade, and then being terribly misplaced is less of a factor, because we do have sort of an articulated math 6, 7, 8, math 1. So there's less of a chance that students are going on to the high school and are being made to repeat courses at the high school, because you couldn't repeat math 8 at the high school. Does that make sense? So this is just some background around the Senate bill. This next slide, I just took a little paragraph from our district's board policy around placement in mathematics courses. In some of the questions that were posed by board members, there was a question specifically about the last sentence. To that end, district staff will engage in courageous conversations about issues of bias to ensure that no preconceived ideas of any student's abilities limit the amount of help or encouragement that students receive. And then there was a follow-up question that asked, how are we doing with that? And so that will be in a follow-up presentation at the will of the board, but did want to just include some of the language from our own board policy. Also want to point out that our board policy speaks to beginning this process in preschool. So in the board packet, there were 3 tables that were provided for you, and I have an additional 3 tables in this slide presentation. So the 3 slides that were provided to you were mathematics 9th grade enrollment patterns for 9th grade students for the 2016-17 school year, for the 2017-18 school year, and then for this school year, 18-19. So 3 years worth of where were 9th graders placed when they came into high school and were placed in a math course. These observations here on this slide refer to that data. And so I think maybe sort of the one observation that's not cited here, but that I will say right now, is that when you look at the math placement data for 9th graders, with the exception of students that are placed in courses per their IEPs, all students coming into the 9th grade are placed in a course that is a UC-CSU eligible course. All students in the 9th grade are placed in an appropriate course that meets UC-CSU requirements. So that would be either Math 1 or this year Math 1-2, right? So we don't have non-UC-CSU courses that students are placed in at the 9th grade. I think that's really important to note, because I think maybe in some other contexts that is happening, and that gave rise to the need for both the law and the board policy to be created. The other things to note from those data tables are that student enrollment totals for Black African American students have decreased from the first year that we started tracking this data in 16-17 to this year 18-19. I believe in 16-17 the number was something like 23 students, and in the last couple of years the number is down to 5. And so that was sort of curious. What was also interesting to note, and we find this in a lot of data sets that we look at, that while the number of African American students is decreasing, the number of students identifying as multiracial is increasing. And so if you look at those 2 data sets, you'll see that the number of African American students has decreased pretty sharply, and that there's a steady increase in the number of students identifying as multiracial at the 9th grade. So we do have the ability, when we query these reports, to sort of tease out what races students are identifying as. But I don't know that we want to maybe sort of artificially assign students to groups based on sort of wanting to have these kinds of conversations, but I do think it's something for us to be aware of. This school year, there are no African American students enrolled in Math 1-2. It should say Math 1-2, the thing was being funny. Enrollment in Honors Math 1-2 is higher for male than female students is another observation. And then another is that enrollment in Honors Math 1-2 is higher for Chinese and white students. I did just a little quick math today and calculated that for all 3 years, the percentage of students identifying as Chinese enrolled in Math 1-2 is at least 40%. So that's significant. And then this year there was a question about Math 1 intervention. So just to clarify, Math 1 intervention, and we also offer Math 2 intervention, are support classes. They're not math credit-bearing classes, but just for your information and for the public's information, there are 11 students enrolled in Math 1 intervention concurrently with their Math 1 class, so it's a support class. So last year when I gave this report for the first time, I talked about a lot of things, and one of the things I talked about was being able to sort of track, now that we've got a few years of data, track some cohorts. I will forever hear President Black's ringing in my ears, 2 years does not make a trend. So we have 3 years, so we are getting there in terms of being able to look at trends of enrollment for the students who started as 9th graders in 2016-17. So that's what this table represents that you're looking at right here. And then this next slide shows the 10th grade for the next year. So these are not exactly the same students. You often, right, you always have students coming and going, so that it's not necessarily a one-for-one correspondence, but this is the enrollment then, if we look at the next year of 10th graders in mathematics courses. There may be a couple, I think there might have been a couple, I took off the students here that were enrolled in like a math lab or an algebra lab, because those students are being placed per their IEPs, right? So this really then just looks at, if we take that course sequence from the 9th grade, and then what does that map onto in the second year when they're 10th graders, this is that data. And then finally, this is the slide for this year that is tracking enrollment of current 11th graders and where they are placed in math courses. So, for example, Math 1 in 16-17 9th graders, there were 102 students that were enrolled in that class as of September of that year. Then if we look over in the next year in Math 2, there are 113 students, which means that some students maybe came from a higher level math course and joined that cohort, but that number is still stable in terms of students being on track to earn 3 years of math UC-CSU approved math credit. And then if we look this year at Math 3, here we see there are 121 students. So Math 3 does earn students that third year of math credit. And so I wanted just to show the cohort in terms of enrollment. The other piece of data that's not provided here, but I'm happy to provide in a Friday update after I have some conversation with Principal Ritchie, and Principal Brill. And Principal Ritchie has graciously agreed to be here tonight to answer any questions or make some commentary, is we do have outcome data in terms of grades that students earned in those cohorts. And I think sort of that's the next place to look, not only thinking about where students were placed, but then how did they end up at the end of the year in terms of maintaining their eligibility for UC and CSU. So that is a next step that we will be taking with secondary principals. I did speak to this in the board backup. So this is just sort of a representation of the information that was provided. So the language of the Senate bill and then also our board policy speaks to strategies to remove barriers to students' access to math courses. And so I just have bulleted out some sort of big topics. Excuse me, so professional development, intervention, program redesign this year, Math 1 and Math 1 plus are combined. And then also just a need for further data analysis. Up in the intervention bullet, I didn't put this, but did want to mention, at the last board meeting, you heard from Heather Duncan, the summer school principal, who talked about maybe one strategy to implement next year would be to offer a Math 1 summer school course. I think that would really potentially fit well as a barrier, as a strategy to remove barriers for students in math. So I think that's very well worth considering. And then I just got a notification today that our Smarter Balance summative assessment results won't be available until the middle of October. We do have data available in TOMS, but in terms of publicly released information, we don't have that yet. And so that is somewhat limiting in terms of being able to use that data in any kind of real time. But we do have information about semester grades that I'll be sharing with secondary principals. And then UC and CSU eligibility rates we'll find out about when our California school dashboard is released later in the fall. So that's all the information that I have for you. I do want to give Principal Ritchie an opportunity to make any comments at this time, if you would like.
Thank you, Director. Good evening. Just to bring home a point, when we look at the achievement gap and some of the, the matrices that we look at really do rely heavily on the standardized testing. And so when the SBAC results come out, we certainly want to take a look at that. But our local indicators are also very valid, and I do want to drive home that one of the goals of my math department is to make sure that all students do have access to an A through G course load, and that does include a third year of math. And so I do want to celebrate, and looking at the data tonight, it does show that not only a majority, but most of our students are electing to take that third year of math, and we want to continue that trajectory. To us, that's a really strong indicator of closing the achievement gap.
Thanks. Questions? Charlie.
So thank you very much for the reports. Really informative. I had one comment, I guess, and that is that a couple of years ago when we were first considering this new curriculum, we were concerned that there would be more than one pathway through the math courses all the way to calculus, so that you didn't necessarily have to start in honors math in 9th grade to make it through to calculus. If you caught fire somewhere along the way, there was still a way to get to calculus. What I'm seeing in the data that you've shown us is almost the opposite of that, I think. It went by a little fast, but I think what I'm seeing is a winnowing out process. When I looked at what's in the board packet, for example, 9th grade honors math 2 years ago, we have 62 students. But for 11th grade this year, we have 45 students in pre-calculus. So to me, it appears rather than maybe people bumping up from one track to another, and I guess we can call them tracks, it's more of a process in which students are discovering that the math course they're in is pretty hard and they're maybe dropping back down a level. That's just my subjective impression of what I was seeing there. I'd like to hear more about that at some other time.
Russ?
I've heard from a lot of people about math at the high school, mostly complaints, including parents saying, my kid used to love math and doesn't anymore. I worry a lot about the attrition, and I will be sounding like a broken record, but I would really like to see the math department revisit the policy of not having graded tests go home, as opposed to, say, the science department, where test correction is a large part of the iterative learning from one's mistakes. I know from firsthand experience with my kid, if she's shown her test in class for a half hour, she's not going to come back to me even with, well, here are the things I knew I missed and need to work on. She's going to be moving on. Where I would like to sit down with her, and I have gone to school several times last year to sit down with her and the test and the teacher. I could do that. I had the luxury this past year of doing that. A lot of people don't. So I think it may contribute to this attrition of kids in the math pipeline that they are drifting. They are not able to get the help they need and the help that they're getting in other disciplines because they can sit down with graded tests. I've also heard that there is an attitude that Math 1-2 is a weeder course, that a bunch of kids come in and half of them don't move on to Math 2-3. That's not the vibe I get from the science department, where the goal is to get people engaged in loving science. So I'd go back to the mastery-based grading. If we have that in science, can we go toward that in math too?
Kim?
I think there has been a lot of parent comment about math at the high school, and so it makes it difficult because everybody's situation is different. We're talking, a parent is talking about an individual student, and the board is looking at the program as a whole. We did ask the question, and we have the information from you, Marie, that last year, I think there were 72 students enrolled in Math 1-2 at the beginning of the year, and that 50 were still enrolled at the end of the year. And so we lost 22 of them, about a third. And it's a very hard class. I mean, the goal of the class is to do a year and a half's work in 1 year. And I think it's a very small percent of students who can actually accomplish that, as well as keep track of all their other classes. These are the students who probably have other advanced classes also that they're taking, and it's quite a time commitment to be in Math 1-2 or to be in Math 2-3. Regarding the math department's change to not having Math 1+ this year, I think that you can, when we're looking at the grades and the success of students, I think you can look at that two ways. On one hand, you can look at it as, eliminating the upper track, or you can look at it as sort of raising up the lower track, maybe. That in a classroom that is more mixed abilities, maybe there's an atmosphere of learning and that will actually foster the engagement and the learning of those kids that might otherwise lose interest and be lost. So I think you can look at that a couple of different ways. I don't know, Alexia, do you want to comment on that?
Just to clarify, we have not eliminated the 1+ class. We have combined the classes. And so what you have is you have a heterogeneous mixing of students with the encouragement, and actually the feedback from our math department this year is that the classes feel more like a 1+ class. I think we could probably talk a little bit more about why we didn't label it a 1+ class, because I think that goes a little bit deeper. But right now, we're very excited to see, and I think another comment was made, the opportunities for students to start with this basic level in 9th grade and then actually get to a Calculus BC course, if they so choose to, by senior year, is now open to everybody on campus, as opposed to just those few that were enrolled in the 1+ or the 1-2 class. And so that really is opening up some opportunities for students that didn't have it before. And again, those opportunities are very equitable in that 1+ model. Nothing is forbidden. Everybody is encouraged to take the 1+ curriculum.
Kayla?
Yeah, you said that the attitude of the classes is more like a 1+ class, right? Is the material that's being taught the same as a 1+ class or the same as a Math 1 class?
It's all the same curriculum. It's just the number of questions and the caliber of questions that are offered to the students, and those students can elect to take either or.
Okay.
So they're finding that more students are electing to challenge themselves with the 1+ questions.
Kim?
I had something to say about the challenges within the department. I did look at the master schedule for the high school today, and the math teachers, I was very, very impressed when I looked at the master schedule, because it was listed by teacher and then the classes that teacher taught. So our math teachers at the high school are typically teaching 3 or 4 different courses in their week. So they'll go from teaching Math 2 in first period to Calculus BC to Stats to a Math 3 Plus class. So they're handling all of these different curriculums sort of simultaneously. And given that, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's more typical for teachers to have fewer different classes to teach. And so I think that this sort of shows that our math department is really stretched to offer all of the different classes that are being offered at the high school.
2 ways to look at that. I think we do try to limit them to 3 preps. I'm not quite sure if anybody has 4 preps, and if so, we should take a look at that. Or else they're very confident in their abilities. Or remember, if they're teaching a class that only has 2 sections, let's say of BC, then we have to give them something else. We have to make sure that the classwork is spread around. But the idea of them looking at the continuum of the entire math department is also very reliable when it comes to other math departments, meaning you don't want a teacher to specialize in just the AP coursework. You want to make sure that they have the full scope of what their math department and what a math student at Albany High School is expected to learn. So usually you will see that divide and that continuum covered by almost every teacher. I think that's a healthy way to look at your master schedule.
I have a further comment, because I did go to the PTSA Math Circle discussion earlier this week, and I did hear parents voice frustration about trying to get extra help for their students and going to outside agencies and hiring people and doing all of this stuff. And I think that a bit of that has to do with communicating with parents at the high school level. You know, like somebody mentioned the fact that they could never get a syllabus. They didn't know how to prepare the tutor that was teaching their kid for the upcoming material because they didn't know what was going to be studied next. And I've learned my ways around there's all these, there's the Aries and the Power School, and there was haiku for a while, and there's, all these different things. And, and my son, who's in high school, he said, I know where all the syllabi are. And so I think that there's an element here of we could do a more excellent job of making things easier for our parents, and so that our parents are able to communicate with teachers and to find things easily online about their kids' education. I think that it started in middle school where parents starting to get a message, sort of hands off. If your kid is going to be absent, you don't talk to the teacher like you did in elementary school. The kid needs to go and talk to the teacher and get the assignments and work. And that increases, that level of independence and maturity increases every year. But by the time you get to the high school, it is really, there's some situations where parents feel so disconnected that they do not feel that they can help their kid any longer. Even the matter of finding an email for a teacher is overwhelming to them. They can't do it. And I'm not saying that these things aren't available on the website. They generally are. But maybe that's more of a barrier than some parents can face. Maybe we can find a way to try to break down that barrier a bit.
Do we have any comments or questions from the public?
My only question, and just because we belong to the Albany Latino families, is on the first page of the presentation, it only addresses African American, Chinese, white, but there's no number as far as like the 1+1 or math 2, only on the actual.
Well, can you speak into the mic? 'Cause
my apologies. There's only mention of Hispanic, Latino, on the actual spreadsheet, but not on this. And those are numbers and figures that Latino families would want to know here in Albany as well. And I appreciate your comments, Kim, because there's a lot of parents who are trying to struggle with hiring tutors, and sometimes the communication. The only reason I've gotten savvy is because we sit through so many IEP meetings with the district that I know that I can sign a form so that teachers can have access to the tutors that are being hired for our son. But even then, it's not easy. It's not very easy for parents to find those forms anywhere to be able to say, it's okay for the teacher to be approached by the tutor. So those are the kinds of things that I really appreciate you making mention of. But it would be good for us to be able to see this form, not just on the spreadsheet of Latino students. And I know those numbers have somewhat become depressed and also grown at the elementary level, but the preparation really starts with the math curriculum in the middle school and what our children should expect in high school. But I just want to give a really strong shout out to Mr. Liu over at AMS, who does a really incredible job of talking to students, even those who have learning disabilities. And it's really great that it starts at that level, but I would just want to be able to see that as well. Thank you.
So just to respond to that comment, just with two things. The first thing was that the purpose of the sort of noting the observations here was just to sort of surface any of the data sets that appeared to be remarkable. So it certainly wasn't an intentional decision not to include data for Hispanic Latino students. The other thing I would say is that for the past 2 years, I also I liaise with the Hispanic Latino Parent Engagement Group, and for at least the last 2 years, I have provided them with a lot of data about how Hispanic Latino students are doing in our schools. And so this year, when I make the presentation, I will be sure to include some of this information also. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so just a point of interest, we're running about a half an hour behind right now. So if we can move on to the next topic. Good.
Thank you. This third staff report is an enrollment update from Carrie Neerheim, our Director of Student Services.
Good evening, President Black, Superintendent Williams, and the board. I am really looking forward to bringing you this update. We've been working very hard in the enrollment office. I'd like to recognize Kristen Nichols, who is our new enrollment coordinator, who has been working tirelessly to continue the work that Director Williams did to streamline systems, to go digital. We're trying to be as paperless as possible, but also to have accurate tracking of numbers and kind of a more refined tracking of numbers. So, we started tracking enrollment March 2nd, weekly. And as of August 20th, we started tracking daily our enrollment numbers so that we would have the most current numbers for our principals to make staffing decisions for our classes. We were concerned that we might need to have a 4-5 combo at the elementary level, but through the tracking process, we realized we did not. And part of that came from not having a 4th class at Marin, that we were able to avoid a combination class, which can't always be avoided, but we were able to do that this year. And so one of the questions that has come up is about inter-district transfers. We want to welcome students to our schools when we can from outside of Albany. And so this year we have had 8 inter-district transfers. 6 of those transfers were children of AUSD employees. We had 3 in kindergarten and 1 in 3rd, 4th, 6th, 9th, and 11th. Currently, at AUSD, we have 413 students on inter-district transfer. And as you can see from the breakdown here, the largest number of our inter-district transfers are in our 11th grade class. And so when you think about the small number that came in this year, we're trying to keep our numbers as even as possible. Thinking about, for example, there's a very large class in the 9th grade this year. And also at AMS, they're kind of tight right now, but we know the annex is coming. And so just keeping these things in mind, making sure that we are able to accommodate all the students that we have. These are the breakdowns of students in classes as of 11 o'clock today, including the enrollment of a new 5th grader, welcome to Albany, that happened today. Again, we are tracking these numbers daily. We also created an exit survey that is attached to the exit form so that when parents are leaving Albany, we ask if they can share the reason for their leaving. They also have the ability to request a phone call from me if they want to discuss more why they are leaving. This came out of one of the recommendations from Albany coming together, and so we were excited that we could implement that already. In K through 3 with class size reduction, we need to average 24 students. You can see that our 2nd grade class is our most full grade level. We were watching and tracking very, very carefully right up until the last moment. We still are within our average, our district average for class size reduction, well within. And so far, we still do have 2 spots available for the number 25. We didn't want to go that. We are hoping that. We know that a lot of times at Ocean View, there's some fluctuation in numbers that starts around October. So we'll be watching that very closely to see what the trend is. Here's our 3rd through 5th grade classes. And again, in 4 and 5, classes can go as high as 29. We're under that now with our highest class being 27.
So when you say can go as high as 29, that's the teacher's contract as to how many students maximum, whereas in the lower grades, we also have the issue of we could maybe go to 29, but because we are accepting additional monies for class size reduction, we can't go above a threshold of average of 24 across those.
Exactly. We can go to 28, but with class size reduction, so as long as our average is 24 K through 3, then we are okay, which is why those 2nd grade classes at 25 still works for class size reduction. At the middle and high school, these are numbers as of today. Also to let you know that our numbers, again, our 6th grade is high this year. And so I have been reaching out to principals to make sure, as you saw the numbers before, we did let in 1 or 2 students at each of these schools, but we wanted to make sure we could accommodate with the high caliber of education. This is the only chart that is not as of this day, but it is from the month of September. I want to thank Jackie for pulling this and putting this together for us from CalPADS. I'd like to call your attention to the total changes, and I'm so excited because it's 5 years as opposed to not 2. It is 5 years. So if I draw your attention to 14-15, we see that there were 3,829 students. It dropped by 46 the next year, and then by another 106 the following year, which actually was a drop of 152 from 14-15. It dropped again in 17-18. And while it says that we are up 65 students, which we are, we're still 126 less than we were in 14-15. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. Ms. Nichols and I are really committed to making sure that we can answer any questions going forward to the principals and to the staff about who left and who came in and when. Particularly with students in attending university, we want to make sure we're very careful about tracking trends of when students come in and out from the school and providing this data to you each year and to the principals. Are there any questions?
What? Charlie?
So these are not the most current enrollment numbers for 2018-19. Do you know how today's numbers compare to that 3703 number that I see there?
I could send it to you. It's very close.
Okay.
I mean, it's really ballpark. I would say it's within 10.
Okay.
Other questions? Public? Okay, thank you very much for that report.
Thank you so much. And it's still me.
Okay.
For this next item, this is for the Albany Middle School Behavior Matrix, which is supposed to come to the board. And I'm going to turn it right back over to Carrie.
Okay. I want to thank you all for the questions. And prior to the meeting today, I also want to recognize Principal Brill and Assistant Principal Halpert for all the work they've done on this. They're going to explain everything that got them to the process. There were some questions that came up that replicated some of the questions we had on the high school matrix, which we corrected today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Halpert. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Happy new school year. It's good to see you again. My hope is to give you an idea of how we created and implemented the behavior matrix over the past 3 years. And then Ms. Brill and I can respond to any questions and to the new student board members. It's good to see you. So I started at Albany Middle School in 2015-16, and in that year I was tasked with incorporating both restorative practices into the middle school and also with systematizing our responses to student behavior. And the way that we addressed that was through creating the Restorative Justice Committee. It was a committee that we formed in the fall of 2015, and we knew that we were going to be tasked with redesigning the school's behavior matrix. And so I really wanted to be intentional about who was on that committee. And so you'll see in the table there the people that were on that committee. I knew headed into this that the national statistics about over-referrals and suspensions for students of color, for boys, and for students with disabilities. And it was really important to me and Ms. Brill that we had those voices represented on the Restorative Justice Committee. So in addition to the teachers, the campus supervisor, and the counselor, we invited 2 of the current student board members' classmates to be on that committee with us. One of them was an African-American student, and the other was a multiracial student. And then the parents that were on that was one a Latino parent of a special education student, and then an African-American parent of an African-American male student. This group met monthly over the 2015-2016 school year, and were tasked with, we came up with these essential questions that we wanted to answer is, what was the current discipline system at AMS at that time? How did it support and or hinder student growth? And how is it relevant to the AMS student in terms of, is it just what they receive when there's a harmful action? So what you'll see in front of you is a timeline of the creation and implementation of the behavior matrix that we're using now. So we started just looking at what did we want a behavior matrix to encompass, and we drafted a shared vision of what we wanted that to be. We shared that out with the whole staff. And then from December to about February, we engaged in collaborative learning as a PLC. You'll see the title of the book that we read together, the Little Book of Restorative Discipline for Schools. We also, some of us attended different restorative conferences and workshops and had people to the committee to really, so that we could all wrap our heads around what is restorative justice, what are restorative practices, and how can that be implemented in a school setting. So from that, we took the behavior matrix that was in existence prior to 2015-16 and kind of stripped it down and then built it back up with restorative practices and then traditional disciplinary practices embedded in that. In April of that year, we spent about an hour and a half with the whole staff reviewing that behavior matrix to solicit feedback, suggestions, and questions. We then kind of reworked the behavior matrix after getting their feedback. And then in May and June of 2016, We finalized our shared vision and the behavior matrix. Within all that, we would, after each meeting that we had from the committee, we were sharing updates and highlights via the meeting highlight protocol, and this was also discussed frequently at our leadership meetings. And then in August 2016, we began to use the newly created matrix. It's not something, and we published it to the website. It's not something that we wanted to put in student planners at that point because we knew that it was going to still need some reworking and tweaking, there being a very big difference of something in theory versus practice. And over the past 2 years, we have been using this behavior matrix to inform Ms. Brill and I's decisions about consequences and approaches to student behavior and behavior that causes harm. And some of the ways that we've implemented it, calibrated, and updated it is that we have the behavior matrix that's set out at the beginning of the year, and we commit to using that the whole year because we really want there to be consistency and fairness for the behavioral consequences that are being assigned. We didn't feel comfortable changing those consequences in the middle of the year that we were under. So each year we keep a working copy that Ms. Brill and I will meet about, we'll talk about, we'll update as we're going through different situations and working with students and working with families and teachers. Our biggest goals of those updates are to keep students and staff safe. I think that's the #1 job that we have. We also are looking at how can we reduce suspensions, and then what is the most effective way to change student behaviors. And I think that really gets at it. Is it through consequences? Is it through education? And I know there's a lot of different viewpoints and research that would support both of those. So we keep that working copy for the year. We've also been exploring other ways to reduce suspensions as alternates or alternates to suspensions. And so we've attended various restorative trainings. One of the counselors and I went to the Alameda County Office of Ed for brief intervention strategies, which are counseling strategies used when students are intoxicated or under the influence at school. And then this year, this school year, the 18-19 school year, was the first year that we published the behavior matrix in the student planners that all the students have, and it's on the website as well. So I mentioned that the behavior matrix that we have is kind of like having one foot in the door of traditional discipline and one foot in the door with restorative practices. And again, we use both of these as a tool to keep students safe, but also because Ms. Brill and I firmly believe that behaviors are best changed through education and reflection and not just through consequences. I think in certain situations, especially when safety is at play, traditional consequences such as detention, suspension are important and necessary, but we are also aware of our own statistics of referrals and suspensions and how that breaks down along gender and race and ability and socioeconomic status, and so we're really working to replace suspension as an initial consequence when safety isn't a core issue. I also wanted to talk just a little bit about how the behavior matrix is set up. When you're reviewing the behavior matrix in the packet, you'll see that there's 3 different levels. And that doesn't mean that we each time go, okay, this is the first time this happened, that's level 1, level 2, level 3. It takes into account both the number of times that it's happened, but also the severity of the incident. And I'll walk you through an example so we can get a little bit better view of that. Some of the policies in the behavior matrix we are mandated to have, as you all know, by Ed Code. There are mandated suspensions or recommendations for expulsions for things such as arson, selling or distributing controlled substances, sexual assault or possession or use of firearms or explosives, and then pretty much everything else is left at our discretion. And so, for example, a student who is not distributing or selling drugs and alcohol, our response right now is focused on how can we give them the supports that they need to increase their safety and help them to make positive choices for their life that isn't necessarily sending them at home where they might be at greater risk and disconnected from the campus community. And so the example that I wanted to walk you through was of vandalism, graffiti, destruction of property. And you could see that from a level 1, that could be a student that often comes up at middle school. An example would be kind of like trashing the bathroom would be like one of those level 1, and a level 3 could be either multiple of those types of actions or something. Luckily haven't had to deal with a level 3, vandalism, graffiti, or destruction of property at the middle school, but it just gives us a range of responses to not just have one canned response for each behavior that comes our way. And that's all I had. I know that there were questions from the board, and I hope that Ms. Brill and I were able to answer some of those earlier today, but I'm sure there's more, and we're happy to field those.
Okay, board questions? Charlie?
So it's a very long table. Thank you for all your work. And so I'm just going to start with the first row, absences, but I'm not going to go through every row. What I wondered is if you could just tell us a little bit more about how you distinguish, what criteria you use to distinguish between excused and unexcused absences.
So I follow the letter of California Ed Code for determining absences, and we try to be, our main job is to be consistent with that. So unexcused absences, or it's easier to say excused absences, are illness medical appointments. Up to 10 are kind of freebies. You don't have to have a letter from the doctor. So you could call your kid in, Charlie, and say, hey, my kid's sick today. You get 10 either period or full days. After that, it has to have a doctor's note. So illness, medical appointments, religious observations, court appointments, and then funerals or bereavement, and then approved independent study is what is excused, and anything else is unexcused.
And just to clarify, is there any significance to 10 medical? It sounded like that either periods or full day absences. So you could have 10 single period absences, and then you need a doctor's note?
Yeah, that's what California Ed Code says, and
Okay.
I'm following what they tell me there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I know that this, the absences, they're row 1, but really it's a little bit different to have this be part of the behavior matrix because it's sort of a separate issue. I know that with my 2 kids, I've gotten the truancy letter, I think, for both of them at different times, once in elementary school, and I realize that the school has to send those out. It's a legal requirement. But the language of that letter is very harsh. I don't remember the exact wording, and I didn't save the letter. But if your kid has a bad year with getting the flu, and then you have to go to a family funeral somewhere, you can really creep up over 10 really fast. And the letter comes across to parents as if you are a total deadbeat and you are just the most irresponsible parent in this city. It's borderline offensive, really, and because of that, I wonder if it's possible to have a cover letter that you might send with it saying, we understand that you've had a rough year with illnesses and with family situations. We're required to let you know this other information here that is attached.
It's a fabulous idea and something that we're doing this year based on feedback that I heard last year from families. Mm-hmm. So I have a cover letter drafted, and when we're sending those truancy letters out this year, if it's for situations that you're describing where a kid just is sick or there's family circumstances and it's not, I don't know the word that I want to say, but there's not avoidance of school, right? Mm-hmm. And the student and the family is doing what they can to be there, then I have that cover letter attached and ready to go. And then I know that also with Director Neerheim, it's something that we're working on with the SART-SARB proceedings and looking at what is required per Ed Code, because some of the language in that, I think the scarier language in that is to a certain extent required by Ed Code, but we're looking at what can we change and how can we increase consistency across all schools for those absence letters, truancy letters.
That's super. It's good to know. I also wonder if you can go over the bereavement, because I believe it's only immediate family. or grandma, granddad, but not aunt or uncle, or something like that?
I don't ask questions with bereavement. I know the statutes around that is that it's 1 day for in-state service, which seems limiting to me, and up to 3 days for out-of-state or out-of-country.
And what are the timelines for establishing an independent study program?
So at the middle school, we ask that families notify us in the office or the teacher 10 school days prior to the independent study. And then the independent study ranges from a minimum of 5 days to a maximum of 20 days, and you can have one per semester.
Okay, thank you.
Jacob?
Yeah, I just have a real quick one. My son started 6th grade this year and he's having a great time, and we know a lot of other families who are in 6th grade as well, and I was just hoping that maybe in the future you could possibly talk to some of the staff about being a little more lenient on them for tardies for the first week of school maybe. My son and some other people were getting tardies when they were actually in the classroom, but they weren't sitting in their seat. So I could see a 7th or 8th grader who understands that it's very important to be on time, but for a kid who's in a whole new environment, to get a tardy on the second day of school when he was actually in the classroom and not in his seat, I think was a little much.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, we definitely, in general, encourage teachers the first few days to be more lenient around the tardies. I think that this year was an interesting year because it's the first time that we've used bells in the middle school, and we were really working hard at like, okay, we want students to understand as a school-wide academic behavior what it means to be on time, and therefore we really asked all teachers to come to agreements about what it means to be tardy. Because previously in some classes it was that if your homework and pencil and everything weren't out, you were tardy. In other classes, as long as you were in the door, you were on time. In other classes, they were, if you're in the door within a couple of minutes, you're on time, and it was confusing for students. And so we worked together as a staff to come up with, okay, what can we all live with? Which was that you need to be in the door and in your seat, or NPE on your number in order to be on time. And so I think that there was a lot of emphasizing around like, okay, we're gonna be consistent about this, we're gonna all do this. And maybe that overshadowed a little bit of like our first week, like, okay, let's just make sure that, we're making the kids feel comfortable and they're still getting used to it all. And so I think that's good feedback and something that we can focus on more next year.
Thank you very much.
The questions? Questions from the audience? Thank you for doing all this work over all these years. See one person coming up.
I want to thank both of you for the report on this. The problem I've had is that Albany Middle School has been very quick in suspending kids, my son in particular. And as far as absences go, the school district is not also taking into consideration the mental health issues of bullying, and that bullying also provokes depression, that our children don't want to come to school. And in my son's particular case, I can speak to 2 incidents in which he was suspended unfairly because he responded to the bullying after so many weeks and months that we went to the teachers, the principal, the vice principal, on being able to do something and intervene. My son finally was assaulted in the classroom and he responded. At a later time, he was suspended. And this is a problem I have, that sometimes these issues are not taken into accountability. And yet we have all of these different parameters that are now built and blue ribbons are being handed out. And the issue I have is that in the cases where we were addressing these issues with mental health, children that have IEPs, they are not being addressed in any of this. Now in the conversations that we have now with both David and Deborah, it's a different tune, but I do want to insist that these behaviors and the matrix also has to include mental health issues and those IEPs that our children have. You can't just put them in a silo again. And this is the issue that I've had consistently with the school district, that they do not address this. And you have been quick in suspending my son. And other children, I've found out that other kids have also been in the same position. We don't know what's happening to the kids that are assaulting our kids or bullying them. We just know the line is, we cannot be told, and we respect that. But we see our kids suffering and there's no recourse, there's no answers being given to us. I've had to call Albany PD to the middle school to file a report for assault on my son at the school. And I'm not expecting the teachers to become police officers. They already have a lot of load on their shoulders. But I do expect for the district and for this program to be more inclusive at the demands of what those IEPs reflect and what is provoking children to sometimes react in their defense when nobody is answering to that. So I'd like for that to be addressed. And this is Latino Heritage Month, and the school district for the last 2 years has been talking about inclusivity and the issues of race and class, specifically here in Albany. This is the month that you're supposed to celebrate Latinos in Albany, and there is nothing through the city. There's still nothing through the school. I spoke to a teacher and I sent her an email, and teachers are really trying very hard to make sure that our children that have brown skin, that are African American, are being felt like they are part of this community. But how can those children feel part of that thread if there's no mention of what our contributions are? And that also needs to be celebrated. So I would ask that the school district consider having some celebration of Latino heritage, whether it's Day of the Dead or Cinco de Mayo or this month. I understand this is the kickoff month for the school year, but we also need to be able to see that we are being included, one, and two, that we are also being celebrated, because when you are not or do not feel a part of the thread of the community, you also have behavioral issues. And that has to be taken into account. Thank you.
I think there are a few really important points in there, and there are a couple I wanted to call out. I think, in terms of the Latino heritage piece, I think there's so much that can be done and so much more that should be done. We certainly integrate in announcements this month of calling out specific people who have had accomplishments that are important for students to note, and we do the Dia de los Muertos, and there are pieces that are integrated into classrooms, but I think certainly there is always more that can and should be done and that we should be focusing on. The other piece that I wanted to mention that I think was really important and that Mr. Hoppert and I talk about quite a bit is just that piece of meeting individual student needs. And I think one of the things that you come into with a matrix like this is that we really want to be consistent, and we want to make sure that that we're examining biases, and that we're making sure that when X action happens, and we'll ask ourselves these questions and challenge each other. Would you be reacting differently to this if this was a boy versus a girl? Would you feel differently in this situation versus that situation? Really trying to be consistent with implementing. But then on the other hand, you have individual students who have individual needs and individual, personalities and backgrounds and challenges. And so, I think when you're looking at pieces around whether a student has disability or whether a student has mental health issues or whatever it is, and then you think about, and how does that impact what their behavior is, and how do they learn differently? Because in the end, our job as a school is to educate, not to punish. Right? And so we want our behavior matrix to be educational, not punitive. And so how do you educate someone? Well, people learn differently, and we know this. And they learn differently academically, and they learn different behaviorally. And so when you have a student where you say, well, this is the consequence, but I don't actually think this is going to make any difference in supporting that student's learning, this would instead, how do you manage that and balance that against the need to be consistent with our student body? And so I think, it's a really important questions that are raised, and I think there are discussions that we need to keep having and keep pushing ourselves on.
Thank you. Okay, we are now running half an hour behind, and before we do anything else, I think we need to extend the meeting.
So I move we extend the meeting to 9:30, 9:35. What do we need?
Let's say 9:35 and see how that goes.
9:35.
Okay, is that all right? Okay, so that'll bring us to when the Albany Middle School Behavior Matrix comes back, shall we bring it back on consent? Or do we want another discussion?
I know that there were a number of wording comments.
So,
that were made.
I would request, if it's brought back on consent, that the changes be highlighted.
Thank you.
Is that acceptable? Okay. So we'll bring that back on consent with all the changes highlighted. Thank you. Albany Aquatic Center Fiscal Solvency Plan.
Thank you, President Black. The purpose of this agenda item is for the board to approve an Albany Aquatic Center fiscal solvency plan, and this includes adjustments to the Aquatic Center fee schedule as well as the Aquatic Center unrepresented class employee salary schedule for hourly employees. And Jackie Kim is going to introduce and talk about this topic to have the Albany Aquatic Center become fiscally solvent. Ms. Kim. It's getting close to you.
So the district goal for the Albany Aquatic.
Can you hear the?
The mic is the mic on?
Yeah, she needs to talk right into it. She's a sophomore.
The district goal for the aquatic center is to be self-supporting, and last fiscal year, the center fell short of this goal by approximately 100,000. Due to about 50,000 is due to one-time major repairs and new equipment purchase. In the other 50,000 is less classes we offered and increase in staff benefits for salaries employees. So tonight, this evening, we are proposing two things here: increase in fees for classes and pool uses, and also increase salaries for hourly employees. And we met with the current pool committee, and we got good support, and I see some of the members tonight. Also, if this plan is approved, it will be implemented on January 1st, 2019. And this will have impact of increase of our income of about 47,000 in general fund. And I'd like to point out a few data here. So our pool director and staff prepared and gathered this data and these.
I don't think anybody can actually see that, so if you could magnify it.
Right. The only thing I wanted to mention is, so Newark is the only indoor pool from this chart. And they are charging about 9, 7, and 3. You can see right there. And currently we have about $6 and $4.25. So we are proposing $7, $5.25. And the average of all other pools in Bay Area that we have researched is about 6.83 to 6.21. So we are proposing about the averages. The other thing that I wanted to point out is, okay, so the data here. So when you look at El Cerrito, it's a 14, 17, 16, and 22, 17, and 21. And currently, Albany is paying about $2, even $6 less than El Cerrito pays. So this is the amount we are proposing this evening. And at the end of this worksheet, we have about 47,000 of net income in increase in general fund. And our aquatic director is here tonight, this evening, so if you have any questions, she's available as well.
Okay, questions? Ross?
Well, on the chart, I'm noticing that we're actually significantly higher on average than the average for the youngest people using the pool. I mean, it looks like the average is more like $3. We'd be at $4.25. I could certainly see raising some adult rates if we're below average, but I wouldn't want to go much higher if you're trying to encourage people to be swimmers, to be overcharging the younger. Also, so do we receive any revenue from the city for the pool? Who is arranging I know there's a program for showering for homeless. Is that something the district is footing the bill for, or is that something where we're break even because what's being paid, and paid by whom? be interested in hearing a little bit about that, because it feels like it's a service we're more or less doing for the city of Albany or the Albany community, not just AUSD.
Good evening. It's way past my bedtime now, so. So the shower program is a community program. So we have a facility use fee that was established in 2011. There was tons of questions about it back then. I don't know if you guys remember. But the community pays for each shower that comes in. They have a pass that they use. So every month we send out an invoice. It's $3 per shower. That's the same as we charge for any other person coming in, that like tennis players that play in the park in the morning and then want to shower before they head out to work. It's the same fee, and that's totally covered by a community resource fund.
Julie?
So one thing I just wanted to add, I know that you've mentioned this before, but I didn't hear it in the presentation, and that is that the pool has never encroached on the general fund. Although it had an operating deficit last year, it was funded through its previously accumulated surpluses from the several years before that. Same with this year. So I thought that was just worth highlighting here in public session.
That is correct. And as of June 30th, 2018, the pool has a reserve balance of about $200,000 as well.
And we did establish a separate fund for pool maintenance in the future. So a percentage of our revenues will now be put aside to prepare for repairs and new equipment that we need. So it's not such a big shock in the future.
So another thing I just wanted to observe is that when we were working on the new pool several years ago, 2010, 2011, one of the analyses that was done made it really clear that the key to fiscal solvency was as much programming as possible, putting out as many revenue-generating kinds of programs and activities as possible. I just wanted to highlight that. That was the whole concept behind how the pool would operate. And so I wanted to appreciate the direction you've gone with that you're thinking about doing that, and you're thinking about what you need to do to increase programming. So thank you.
Kim?
Just to tie in to the speaker who spoke before the general meeting, I know that Albany Armada is a wonderful program, and I would just ask that you guys cooperatively look at those numbers again on the lane usage to see if, because evidently how that revenue works out is not completely agreed upon about whether it be an increase for the pool or a decrease. But if that could just be looked at again, because I love the idea of getting as many kids as possible in the pool swimming, and I know that there's probably adults in that lap lane that are swimming also, but just bringing it up, if you can just look at that again, because I would love for both programs to be able to exist and simultaneously. Thank you.
Just related to that, with the increase in staff that you're hoping to get by raising salaries, would that give you more flexibility in dealing with programs like that, because you would have more hours to have classes because you'd have more staff to cover the hours?
Not exactly, but if we had more revenue, we could definitely look at increasing lanes for Armada, and we already have a idea proposal that we're working with Helen on ways to increase those lanes while possibly having some help from her in the lessons area, the lessons program, so that we are able to offer more lessons each hour of the day. And something else that I just wanted to bring up, in 2011-12, when we came up with our first set of fees, we were higher than everyone in the area. We were paying more than everyone in the area, but also our fees to swim were slightly higher than everyone in the area. Very soon after we placed our stuff out, everybody else increased their fees, their salaries. Every time we make that jump, everybody in the area is going to make their jump. So it might look like we're asking for a large increase, but the fact is, when you look at everybody else in the area, we're way behind on how much we pay our staff hourly. And I can assure you that the other pools in the area will increase their fees when we increase ours. Because it happens again and again.
We have other questions in the audience? Come on up.
So while he's coming up, I'll comment. I arrived on the board after the pool, but I think there was some opportunities missed given the love that Albany residents had for the old pool. I would have loved to have seen commemorative bricks for people's parents who enjoyed the pool and had long passed. Like you can get a memorial bench in Berkeley at the Rose Garden or at Cesar Chavez Park or UC Botanical Gardens where they're selling bricks in the pavement for a lot. I also think it was rather unfortunate the way the transition was handled, where I remember that old passes to the old pool were no longer valid, and that wasn't the same. Well, there was a lot of discussion about that. Good, because the more we can rely on that goodwill of the old pool, and may it now rest in peace, and keep up the community interest in the new pool, the better.
Okay.
I'll be short. Self-disclosed, I have a lot of swimmers, from graduates that are 30 some odd years old to people that are now swimming over in Armada. I first of all wanted to say that the raise in compensation as well as fees, in my estimation, having worked with lots of programs, as well as with Berkeley, which isn't in your cited examples, seems to be fine. I know the Berkeley fees are quite a bit higher where I participate and so forth, so I wholly endorse that. And I wanted to also say that the notion of looking deeper, as some of you alluded to, in terms of the allocation of space, in my 35 years of watching pools flourish or decline, is really the key. When you've got a program, you don't want to diminish it to the point where all of a sudden it needs to leave because it doesn't have enough space to actually flourish, and you want to be able to try to maximize the number of people in the lanes. It sounds like you're looking at that, and I can't say enough to continue to that with that sort of emphasis. And I guess finally, in the East Bay, relative to the group over on the other side of the hill, this is one area that you can really be proud of. Albany has one of the best pools in all of East Bay. It's producing some really great talent, and it's something to be proud of because it doesn't exist in a lot of other places. So thanks.
Thank you.
Sir, would you mind identifying yourself and your role?
My name is Ben Swiggett, and I've got 3 older kids that have gone through it. I've been with master's programs, high school programs, YMCA I've been with swimming for 40 years, watching these kinds of things. So it's important to me to see that things in a pool setting are sound and grow.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ben.
My name is Alan Ling. I'm a physical therapist, and I've been running an aquatic physical therapy program at the Albany Pool for 28 years. And I just want to say that the change in our economics in the area has really created a pretty devastating environment for people who work at the pool. I have my own administrative staff that work for $17 to $20 an hour. And we are having, we have physical therapists who work for $80,000 to $100,000 a year, and we're still having trouble finding people to work. So with this raise in just the basic hourly rate to find good instructors for the pool and lifeguards, I think is absolutely critical in order for the pool to flourish. If you cannot get help, you basically don't have a program. And the same thing, I have a business, and if we don't have the help to schedule patients, to even greet people, do our billing, we won't exist. So I implore the board here to look at this program. The hourly rate is very, very reasonable, and I hope that all of you will see fit to give the pool what it needs to flourish. Thank you.
Thanks. Jacob.
Yeah, I want to start off saying that I support the raise, and I'm all for it, and hopefully, that's how the vote will go. I also did just want to mention something that for the lifeguard front desk, I guess currently it's $12 an hour. Is that correct? It's on page 109 of the board packet.
It's not one.
Well, it says 48, but that's a right. So if you go down a little bit, please. So it says currently the lifeguard is getting $12, and then the proposed is to go to $15, right? And I want to say I support that. I've been asking for a $15 minimum wage for the whole district, for every employee, and we're working that way. I just wanted to state on a percentage-wise, and I know it's very few people, but that is like a 25% raise. And last year when the rest of the board gave the administrators their health benefits back, they got some really large percentage raise. So I would just like to keep it in mind, and I just wanted to say it publicly that CSEA and ATA and other unions are in negotiations, and maybe we can be as generous with other folks as well too. But I do support this, and I want this to go through.
Thanks. Okay.
So are we
we
ready
take
for
that as a motion?
Yeah, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to stop anybody else from speaking.
Well, I'm ready to second it if you would like to move it.
Okay, so a motion by Jacob to approve the solvency plan. And a
Second.
from Charlie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Vote passes. Thanks for coming. Okay, now we have a proposal for a change in the weekday custodial fee for facility use for non-AUSD users.
This item is to approve 10% weekday custodial fees for the facility used by non-AUSD users. So we have not charged any custodial fees, as you can see, for the weekdays. We were thinking that since we have custodians on site during the weekdays, we might not have to charge this. However, we realized custodians still need to be clean the area, and then we gotta use extra supplies, and sometimes we have to clean up twice. And it's very minimal fee of 10%. So for example, we actually have these examples here. It can be $5 for renting Ocean View for 2 hours, Ocean View multipurpose room. It could be maybe $10 for the fair rental cost. So it's a minimal fees, but something for us to cover. And we expect to have about increase of $20,000 in general fund annually.
Okay. Questions? Ross?
I have no issues with this. It does invite the question about district-city reciprocity. We're here in City Hall twice a month, and that's about it, so far as I can see, in terms of our use of city resources. And yet, I'm hearing that the city is running around doing lots of stuff. So I'd like to know, and not now, but in future, how we're doing on balance in our sharing agreement with the city.
Sure, we can bring it to you.
Okay. Kim?
I would like to know if there are any exceptions to the rental agreements. For example, do church groups pay? There was a situation a few years ago where preschool was looking for some classroom space over the summer. So I just want to know, is this comprehensive, or are there some exceptional classes?
So I'm not sure what preschool you're talking about. Would that be like the Albany Children's Center?
It was way back. It was while their building was being retrofitted, and they ended up staying in place during the retrofit. But I know it was a question that was asked.
So one of the things that we will bring up at a later date is our joint use agreement with the city of Albany. So right now, they would be the only group that would not pay a weekday custodial fee. They also don't pay weekend custodial fees, which can get really tricky because we charge PTAs and other AUSD group weekend custodial fees. So that's something that's been kind of a touchy issue. However, church groups, YMCAs, any group that would come to use our facilities during the week would be charged this 10% fee. If we had a class that just happened, you know, one Monday every month, like chess school, right? One Monday each week, they're going to be charged that tiny little 10% on their facility use fee for the custodian to come back in and clean up, possibly later on, or just for supplies. I've spoke with Anthony about this, and he agrees that a lot of times custodians are coming back in to clean an area a second time. So it's more work for them, it's more supplies that we're paying for, and this tiny little amount is, you know, covering our comic cost, you know? So it's not really that much.
Okay. Any questions, more questions, Charlie?
So actually, I wanted to clarify, does that mean that PTAs that would meet on a school site in the evening would wind up paying a custodial
As we have
fee?
it, no.
Okay.
Okay, other questions? Anyone from the audience? Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the weekday custodial fee for facility use increase.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, we have 10 minutes to get through the rest of this stuff, and we'll have to extend the meeting again. We have a resolution to support the City of Albany's resolution declaring November 11th, 17th as No Hate Week.
Thank you, President Black. I met with Mayor Peggy McQuaid, who told me about the No Hate Week, which is November 11th through 17. And the City Council brought forward a resolution and passed it on September 4th, declaring November 11th through 17th as No Hate Week. And this resolution does align with their strategic plan. And our strategic plan, Goal 2, says that we'll foster the societal and and emotional growth of all students, implementing and array of strategies to increase student engagement, identify individual social, emotional, behavioral needs, and apply collaborative, appropriate interventions. And so the mayor asked if our board would consider passing a resolution in support of the City of Albany's declaration for November 11th through 17 to be No Hate Week. I did receive one comment from a board member to make the change, as you can see on the screen. It is to replace the word commonplace in the third whereas and to change it to more frequent. I'm open for questions from the board or comments.
Jacob?
Is this language essentially the same as the cities, or did you take from that as a starting point and then add additional things yourself?
This is essentially the same, pretty much the same language. The only difference is I tailored a little bit of it to be a little bit more just for Albany Unified, but it's pretty much the same language as what the city used as their resolution. You'll see that the therefore, can you scroll down so I can see the therefore? There you go. So the therefore obviously is a little bit different because we're asking that the school district support the City of Albany's declaration.
Just like to throw in there that I actually would support a declaration of no hate
every day.
in Albany every day for all year.
Yeah, right.
Not just 1 week out of the year. But I'm generally in favor of this. And the the proposed change is fine with me. Any other comments or questions? I have a motion.
So I move we approve resolution number 2018-19-04
With the changes
as revised.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Master contract between AUSD and Discovery Academy.
Thank you, President Black. Excuse me, scrolling down here. Pardon me. Okay. So the purpose of this item is for the Board of Trustees to review and ratify the master contract between Albany Unified School District and Discovery Academy. And Diane Marie, our Director of Special Education, is here to answer any questions from the board.
Okay, so any questions? Okay, I'd like to observe, I had a little bit of confusion here because standard contract is checked here under details, and we've had in the past a lot of contracts that are checked as standard contract, and they're not this standard contract. This particular standard contract is from the SELPA. It's not our own board's, our own district's standard contract, but it is standard. I've definitely read it before. So that's just a slight clarification. I don't think it's an issue. I think you already answered that question.
I did.
Yeah. Okay. So, Olga, did you have a question or comment?
I actually had a comment. Last year, before the school year ended, and all since August of the previous year, we've been talking about making sure that special ed was an agenda item. And we have fought tooth and nail to make sure it became an agenda item. But I would also like to make sure that you're taking it serious about speaking about special ed and having reports as far as updates and what progress is being done on behalf of families and the incredible work that the district is trying to do and accomplish. We want to hear about that, and I would hope that these reports are done as part of the standard agenda item in the earlier portion, because while I'm sitting there, I want to make sure that families are heard and they understand, but a lot of them, are looking at this from home because it's hard to get childcare for this amount of time. And I would just ask that we really talk about the issues that are going on and that they're presented in this agenda item. Because it's a contract issue, you guys are the ones who get to decide, and I know Val's at that table and everyone's trying to do their best, but it's important that we make sure that it's not put in a silo, the issue of special ed.
And actually, the October 9th board meeting has a staff report on special education.
Jacob?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot. I did actually have one. In the board questions and the responses, the very, very last one, somebody had mentioned that the contract is July 2018 and it's already September. So are we, once again, approving a contract that's already been executed?
And I did respond to that. The contract is the template is July 1 through June 30th, and it should have actually been changed to, I believe, September, whatever Monday was, because the student began at this school on December 21, which is, yes, this contract is being ratified.
For September.
Yes, for September.
So we're changing the date in the contract to September.
But we're still approving it after it's been.
That is correct.
Okay, I just want to say this. I don't know how many times Ross mentioned something about a broken record. I've asked over and over and over again that we please don't have contracts that have already been executed. Don't ask for my approval if you're just going to go ahead and do something. It really bothers me, and it happens a lot. And I've been told it wasn't going to happen anymore. Like I've been told a lot of things aren't going to happen anymore, so that's it.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move we approve the master contract between Albany Unified School District and Discovery Academy as listed here.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Passes. And we have one more provisional internship permit.
Please bear with me as I get to the next.
Page 107.
Thank you. It's a long contract. Okay. Can you get to that? Oh, thank you. Okay, so the purpose of this item is for the board to approve the provisional internship permit in science and biological sciences. And Cheryl Cotton is here, our Director of Human Resources, to answer any questions from the board.
Okay, so I think we have here a teacher who's started teaching before she has her permanent credential. Is that what we're talking about?
Actually, Ms. Cotton, can you explain what a provisional intern permit is, please?
A provisional internship permit would allow her to teach in the state of California. And so she currently has one that was issued through Oakland Unified School District. It still is active. We need to change the restriction so that it is representative of Albany Unified School District.
Okay. Questions, Kim?
No, not a question. I just want to welcome Sarah Ward to our district. It sounds like she's incredibly well qualified, and I'm so glad to have her teaching at the high school. And I hope that when she gets her degree conferred in November, then that will solidify her credential, right? And she will be out.
Massachusetts will be able to, oh goodness, Massachusetts will be able to file for her credential. She will, once that has happened, then we can apply for a California credential for her. Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Some small, unheard of Eastern school, Harvard.
Kim, that almost sounded like a motion.
I do. I can move that we accept this provisional internship permit.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That brings us to agenda items, matters introduced by the board. We have 1 minute.
We have one item, which is construction project plan, timeline, student housing. And I'd like to bring this to the board at the October 23rd board meeting, which will give me some time to meet with our administrators and to talk about the temporary housing plan. But it'll also give me some time to work with Juan and to get more information on the process for the geotechnical report.
Jacob and then Charlie.
Okay. Last meeting, I think we talked about bringing a resolution to support city ballot measures to the board at some point. And I didn't want to lose track of that because we have a finite amount of time in which that's a useful thing to do.
I can answer that. Just bear with me for a second. I do have the the two resolutions for, I think it's measures L and M, and I do have those resolutions from the mayor. And I do believe I have that scheduled on the governance calendar for our next meeting as both review and action items.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's too late, but one of the speakers earlier who was here from the Armada swim team, when she was talking about them being cut from 8 lanes to 7 lanes and how she had thought actually it was at least a wash and we were making more money with them. I know there's a lot of stuff on the agenda, but I would like to find out a little bit more about that because is there 8 laps in the pool? I mean, they're just going to take that last lane from them? I mean,
Can we get that in a Friday update?
but I want to be able to act on it because, you know, do you make the final decision or does the directors of the pool make?
But I do have a background and I will do the Friday update.
Because to me, it just seems not okay, but if it's already a done deal, I don't want to make people have to come up and present. But if there's, I don't know if I'm asking, if there's something we can do,
Right.
I want us to at least get more information on it. But if it's already a done deal, it's a done deal.
I don't think it's a done deal. It sounded to me like she was working with the group to
Right.
improve the situation. So I think we could get an update from her, but it could be in a Friday update or a staff report.
It will be a good update because I thought this very interesting and good informative information that I got, so I will share with you.
But if the update just comes back with some information and they go ahead and just cut their lane anyway, I'm not wording this properly, but I want them to be able to keep the 8th lane. And I don't know if that's something we should be deciding.
I thought I heard in the, Amanda's comments that she had already been working with the speaker to work on some issues around them having swim lanes, but also having some of their staff help with the teaching of classes.
So it sounds like the update needs to be, what's the progress on that conversation?
Right.
Thank you.
Ross?
Yeah, I guess one point of advice and one request for an agenda item. On the point of advice, we had a discussion tonight about the high school extension or annex or whatever we're calling it, the addition. If that's leaving us up in the air and there's no concrete outcome known, be prepared for parents and families to say, is Ocean View going to be moved next year? Or is it will be 2 years from now? Or never? They'll come with those questions, and then we should have an answer other than yes for certain, because we're not certain.
So I think, didn't we ask that we have a discussion, we agendize a discussion about the timeline, the schedule, and so forth?
Sure.
That should be a future agenda.
But between now and then, those questions will come. I'm less addressing an agenda issue than just saying the community will ask. On the agenda, so the man who once cooked me dinner, Jerry Brown, just vetoed the school start time bill that was before him on moving the start time back to 8:30. We've all talked about this a lot, and I think we ought to agendize a discussion. I would say I'm hoping towards us saying, no, we're going to change the school start time and make more of an affirmative goal and let people make a case that we shouldn't. But I'd like to see us resolve that for the 2021 year, whatever the bill had been, if at all possible. So I'd like to agendize discussion, if not discussion and action, towards changing the school start time.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Good. So we'll put that on the agenda. Thanks.
Also, as part of the math discussion, I thought that it was mentioned that a look at the grades of the different courses and was going to come back to the board about what progress the students are actually making.
I have to go back and watch the tape again.
Yeah.
But I thought Marie Williams said that she would be providing some of that information in a future update. I have to go back and listen to the tape again. But I know she talked about bringing some additional information in another report in the future.
I would certainly like to keep track of that.
Yeah, I think, we've been in transition to Common Core. There's different math pedagogies going forward at the middle school and at the high school. I think we need to keep a close eye on how things are going in terms of succeeding in our mission to teach kids math.
So would the board like this as a staff report, a Friday update, or a review and discussion item?
I'd like to see it as a staff report myself.
Yeah, and I believe that we did agree that the question of the starting in preschool, as it says in our board policy, courageous conversations, encouraging kids to do math, was going to come back to the board at some point.
Okay, so just want to make sure I'm clear. So for the math grades, you're looking at middle and high school?
No, just high school.
Just high school.
Okay, Jacob?
I'll let it go.
Okay, Olga, the meeting's already over, but if you want to come up and talk to us about something, that's fine.
There's the issue of immigration. We heard federal court today appealing Trump's decision to eliminate TPS and DACA. And we're having a clinic on Saturday. It's free. Wanted to ask the school board if that's also something that we can include as part of the agendas, how we can support families, and also citizenship clinics that we're having both in the East Bay and in San Francisco. So this is something that we want to be able to ask this district if they'll allow to pass it out to the families. It's absolutely free, and we just want to make sure that folks know about that. and I can email it to Val and she can send it to all of you, but we're trying to make sure that our families are protected, both in Albany and in the city with the groups that we represent, but we want to make sure that the district also talks about these uncomfortable topics so that the communities that are watching this know that not only is there an investment in protecting the families, but also resources that are easily accessible so long as it's being published also by the district and supported by it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.